Today is July 1st, 2020. I'm Tom, I'm here with Tony. So, I often watch The Atheist Experience, which is a live call-in TV show out of Austin, Texas, where the hosts are atheists and the callers are usually theists. One of the things they often talk about on that show is faith. It seems like what the atheists mean by the word faith is different than what the theists mean by the word faith. The atheists are defining the word faith to mean something like just randomly believing in God because you feel like it. Whereas I think the theists, what they usually mean when they say they have faith in God is something a little different, like they have some reasons for believing in God, but they don't have they don't think they have strong enough evidence that they would feel they've proven it. But so they say they have faith in God, meaning kind of like that they're living their lives as if God exists because they think there probably is a God, but just they don't have enough intellectual reasons and evidence to feel that they've confirmed that there's a God. So yeah, you can see the misunderstanding there. What about you? Do you say that you have faith in certain things?
I would say so. I would also say that you are correct that faith is essentially can be broken down into the fact that it is the conclusion of a long list of facts. Now, the faith comes in is when there is the next step after all those facts and logical steps. Let's say step 6, out of all the 6 steps, step 6 is the one that doesn't have any necessarily backing, but can have a lot of circumstantial evidence. For example, some people believe in God because they look at the statistics of how we came to be, of the primordial stew, and taking everything into account, and the statistics of, let's say you, Tom, being born. And they say that is extremely improbable, if not impossible, statistics to work with. Now, if you went back to the Big Bang and said, I believe this guy is going to be born with this amount, these characters, this height, etc., it would be great odds against you. Nay, improbable to impossible. So their conclusion is that there must be a first mover or a God, whether that be God, Hashem, Jesus, Buddha, or even the theory that God is the universe itself. But someone or something pulling the strings makes more sense, and that while there's no evidence to support that directly, their faith comes into the fact that their reasoning is based on logic and facts, but the conclusion is not. Their faith is that final step, there is a God, is going to be based on their belief that the next step is the next logical conclusion in that series of events.
So the conclusion, you're saying the conclusion is not based on evidence.
The conclusion is based on circumstantial evidence, that a lot of circumstantial evidence, but there is no concrete evidence that there is a God, whether it be any of the gods of the major religions or even the minor religions, so to speak.
So I think I see what you're saying. You're saying that people have some reasons to believe in, say, the Christian God, but faith is that final step where
It's the bridge. Faith is the bridge to that 6th step, let's say. It's the bridge in which they conclude there must be a God.
Well, the way you're wording it is kind of, I see what you're saying, but I would still say that conclusion is based on all the evidence and reasons they have. It's just a matter of confidence levels. You should never believe something with more confidence than, the evidence you have suggests. Like if I only have 85% confidence that the Christian God exists, well, that's exactly how confident I'd be that the Christian God exists. So I don't understand.
That would be your level of faith, yes.
Well, isn't that just my level of belief based on the exact amount of evidence I have? Like, why would you ever need to say you have faith? That makes it sound like you're believing it more confidently than what you really have reason to.
Just because that there is no evidence of God, of whatever God they believe in existing, their belief system is based on the fact that due to the statistical improbability of it just happening, like it just happened to happen, that's the reason why it occurred, they don't buy that. So therefore there must be therefore the logical conclusion, there must be something behind the scenes or someone behind the scenes. Now that is God. Now obviously different gods like Jesus, Hashem, Buddha, they're all different types of gods, as if the Hindu gods even, Zeus, all different cultures have different answers to this question. So the fact that you could say one has faith, it's going to be the amount of your belief, the percentage of belief that you have that this is the next logical conclusion. Some people can have very little faith. Some people can have a lot of faith. It's all dependent upon how strongly you believe this is the next logical step.
Like in these conversations that I've seen on the Atheist Experience, like what the hosts of the show who are atheists would say to you, they would say faith is just believing something without evidence. But that's not what you're saying. You're saying that you have evidence. It's just the final sort of conclusion?
Because you could take all the gods that exist, or not exist, you could take all the gods that are believed in, and they would all answer that question, which is the next logical step, equally. You could say, well, the Greek gods answer the question just as well as Hashem or Jesus. That's where faith comes in. Which one do you believe is the best answer to that question? The logical assumption, you could just say, well, I believe something's out there. I believe it's improbable. That's where faith doesn't really come into play. It's more of just like, I believe this is the next logical step. Your faith comes into the point of which distinct religion do you follow.
But a lot of Christians would say that, there's evidence for Jesus that doesn't exist for other gods.
So would the Jews, and so would, of course, the ancient Greeks and the Romans and the Muslims. Every religion says that they have definite proof or reasonable proof that their God is the most realistic.
I don't understand really what the epistemological difference is in someone believing in the Christian God versus anything else we believe. Like you claim someone believes in history. I mean, I disagree with the claim that there's a God, but I'm just saying, like,
you could say you believe in history, but that really doesn't make sense logically, because history exists outside of your belief system, because it's already empirically true that unless you have the assumption that time doesn't exist, history must exist. Now, the question is, of course, whether we believe what actually occurred. Did population A commit X atrocity to population B or not? Now, that you could argue depending on what occurred, unless there's physical evidence to show that. But history itself does exist. It's just part of our timeline. It's just part of time itself. For time to exist, history must exist. A past must exist.
And you're saying that someone believing in the Christian God or the Muslim God or the Hindu gods, that involves a different kind of reasoning?
It does, because history, whether you like it or not, whether you believe it or not, exists inside this reality. Now, that's not the same thing as saying, I believe in God. God, depending on what you believe in, is different, and there are different moralities involving and regarding God. If you were a Hindu, you would have different ethics relatively than if you were an ancient Greek.
Yeah.
And so you can't make the argument that whether you like it or not, God exists, because there's not enough evidence for that. It's the logical conclusion that God exists. That's my personal belief. But I can't say there is evidence that Hashem exists more than anything else. That it's my belief and faith that Hashem makes the most sense.
Okay, so you're saying there's like philosophical arguments in favor of it rather than sort of empirical evidence.
Exactly.
Okay, but that's, I think sometimes there's this idea that religious faith is believing something in the total absence of reasons to believe it. But that's not what you're saying. You're saying something a little more nuanced. Like there's a lot of things I believe because I've been convinced by philosophical arguments, but I wouldn't say I have faith in those things. I just say that's more of an a priori, way I came to those beliefs. You know what I mean? There's different methodologies of coming to different kinds of beliefs. Sometimes when we use the word faith in everyday conversation, we use it in a behavioral sense, like when we say you should be faithful to your spouse. And you could have that kind of faith in a God. Like, I could imagine myself believing 75% that the Christian God exists. If I was in that position, I could imagine myself having that behavioral faith in the Christian God, meaning that I would be behaving loyally toward the commandments laid out in the Bible. So I think there's that meaning of the word faith, which is loyalty. I think there's another meaning of the word faith, which is just confidence that something is true, belief that something is true. Like if someone were to say, I have faith that Dr. Smith is going to do a great job on my father's surgery tomorrow. And I have that faith because Dr. Smith is a world-renowned surgeon. He's written textbooks on surgery and medical science. He's a genius. That kind of faith would just be a belief, and that belief would be fully based on the evidence. Then there's another meaning of the word faith that just means religion. Like when people say Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are three faiths, that just means three religions. But then when people say that they have faith in God, it seems like that's a mixture of all three of those meanings. Like when people say they have faith in God, it kind of seems like they're mixing together the belief meaning and the loyalty meaning and the religion meaning, because they're talking about religion. But it's like they have some reasons to believe in God. So they might have 80% or 90% confidence that God exists. So that's their belief. But then they behave loyally toward that God's commandments. And that's a matter of behavioral loyalty because they're not fully convinced that God exists, but they think he probably exists. So they're going to behave loyally because they think that's the right thing to do. I think when you really get down to it, religious people have reasons for believing in Christian metaphysics or Jewish metaphysics or Muslim metaphysics, they have philosophical reasons for believing in the God that they believe in. Often I think religious people, they speak of having faith in God as if faith was a different epistemological method of coming to the truth. So I'm an atheist, but if I start believing in God in the future, it won't be because I just, knelt down on the sidewalk and put my hands up and say, I have faith in God randomly. If I do start believing in God in the future, it will be because something has convinced me that there's a God. It will be because of some philosophical arguments that I've heard or that I've come up with that I think justify my believing in God. I think everything that we believe is because we've reasoned it through and we think it makes sense somehow, whether it's through empirical evidence or through more a priori philosophical arguments. But I think we always have reasons for believing anything we believe. I don't think it's possible to believe something literally in the absence of any reasons.